Okay, good evening to all of you. I hope that everyone can hear. So I take this opportunity to welcome you to today's session, whereby we're going to be seeing how best can we interpret and respond to biology paper 1. So this day's activity will focus on paper 1. That is what you're going to focus on too. Okay, I'm trying to see that I can be louder, but everything will be fine. So the ones asking for the questions, I'm going to share document shortly that we are going to be using. But however, this discussion is going to be hands-on. So I'm going to need most of you to be very active. And most of the things that we talk about are not about the content, but the skills that you need to be able to interpret and respond to these items. And also something that you should take note of is that when we're discussing about this, okay, people still say they can't hear me. Let me first work on increasing the volume of the device, then I hope now my voice is clear. So sorry for that delay. I was just changing the venue to move to a room which is more convenient for all of us. You've seen the program? Okay. Send it to the old library. So via WhatsApp, you search that name, you forward it to her. Okay, sorry for that. Now, I was saying that now here in this new curriculum, there's something that you have to take note of, that it is not always about the content that you have, but is about you having the skills to be able to interpret and understand every scenario that is given to you. And you'll also discover that once you get that skill, then you don't need to practice using 100 scenarios. That once you get the skill, it may be in 1 or 2 or 3 items, that the others will now just be about practicing whether you have the skills or you don't have the skills. So we're going to be very slow and also actively participating to see how we can acquire the skills that can enable us interpret scenarios and also understand the demands of the tasks and be able to respond to them. One of the causes of poor performance in terms of how you respond to this biology is how you interpret the demands of the tasks. On any given scenario, always pay attention to the task. What does the task want you to do? Then you follow what the task wants you to do and you get the necessary information from the scenario. And that is what we're going to focus on in today's discussion. So I'm going to share the items that we are going to use. Then we shall now start item per item to see how we can get those skills. So allow me share my screen. Then okay. So I hope my screen is coming through. If you're able to read the document that I'm sharing, you can wave. Pakada Seed SS, are you there? Pakada Seed, if you're able to read the document that I'm sharing, please wave to me. Students of Pakada Seed SS. Okay, then it is clear. Okay. Now, this is our first item. Now, what is the item saying? For every session, we are going to read together the scenario for us to be able to, for you to be able to comprehend it. Then after that, we shall now start to dissect it to see okay. So this is our scenario. It says that Martin is a pumpkin farmer in Nakasongola village. The village experienced a long dry season characterized by high temperatures, much sunshine, and dry windy conditions. During the season, the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop and flower petals remained closed for a longer part of the day, but they would straighten and open during early morning hours, respectively. Martin had a very poor yield of pumpkins. Then the first task that you're going to respond to is describe how the conditions experienced affected the functioning of the pumpkin plants, which led to the poor yields. Now, like I told you that the most important thing on the scenario is the task. The task means what are you going to respond to? Yes, they have given you a scenario, but on that scenario, what are you going to respond to? And now here we are. The scenario, it is about pumpkin farming in Nakasongola village. Then the conditions that have been faced by that village, and then also how the plants are behaving or how the plants are responding to these changing environmental conditions. And they're saying that because of all that, Martin had a very poor yield of pumpkins. Now, the task that you're going to respond to is this. They're saying, describe how the conditions experienced affected the functioning of the pumpkin plants, which led to the poor yields. Now, whenever you read these items and you look at the task, always first ask yourself the first question. What does this task want from me? What does the task want? And you can rephrase it in your own other terms in a simpler way. Now, for instance, now when I look at this task in my own ways, I'm able to see that this plans wants us to know how the conditions experienced affected the plants. That is how I'm able to restructure this task here in my own, in simple terms. So maybe let me type it here to guide people who are just logging in. So in my own interpretation, it means that the task wants us to know how, okay, let me just say describe how the conditions, affected the plants. So I hope if I summarize my task like that, it doesn't distort the meaning. How the conditions affected the plants. The original task is saying, describe how the conditions experienced affected the functioning of the pumpkin plants, which led to the poor yields. Now, if I have got that this is how the conditions, so this is how, so where am I going to get this information from? Where am I going to get it from? Now, in this task, they have, in the scenario, they have given us some information about how the plants behaved. And now the task is here asking us to describe how did these conditions experienced in the village affect how the plants functioned. Now, where am I going to look for the answers from? Always, when you want to go back to review the scenario to get what you're looking for, always start reading from the very first word. Now, in my case here, or in my scenario here, I will start afresh from the word Martin. So I'm going to start reading afresh, but why am I reading? I want to discover how did these conditions affect the plant? How did the conditions affect the plant? That's what I'm looking for. So I will start. The first statement is saying, Martin is a pumpkin farmer in the village. And I'm not seeing there anything that I'm looking for in this, in that statement so far. Then I'll continue reading. They are saying that the village experienced a long, dry season characterized by high temperatures. So the village experienced a long, dry season characterized by high temperatures. Is there anything that I want? I'm looking for how the conditions experienced affected the plants. That's what I'm looking for. How the conditions affected the plants. So from this statement here, let's see if okay. From this statement here, I want to highlight it. So far I have read up to here that the village experienced a long dry season characterized by high temperatures. Now, there is nothing that I'm looking for. I'm not looking for the conditions. Take note, I'm not looking for the conditions. I'm looking for how the conditions affected the plant. Then, okay. Then I will continue reading. Much sunshine and dry windy conditions. That statement still doesn't give me what I'm looking for. I'll continue reading. During the season, the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop. So during the season, the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop. I think there is something there. They are saying the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop. And what am I looking for? I'm looking for how the conditions affected the plants. So it means now, so far I have gotten what I'm looking for. and I'm going to note it down. So if in your books you write response number 1, you first write that word, that drooping of leaves. So you take note. So you note down drooping of leaves. So that is my first point. Remember, we are looking for how conditions affected the plants. That's what we are looking for, how the conditions affected the plants. And so far I have drooping of leaves. That's what I have so far. Then I'll continue reading. And flower petals remained closed for a longer part of the day. This statement here. Flower petals remained closed for a longer part of the day. Now, this one could also be that it is caused by the conditions. The closure of the flower petals, or sorry, of the flower petals for a longer part of the day. So I think this is also another thing that I'm looking for. So I'm also going to advise you to note it down. So note it down. Our second point is closure of the flower petals for a longer part of the day. Then I'll continue reading. Then I'm saying, but they would straighten and open during early morning hours, respectively. They would straighten and open during early morning hours, respectively. Is that so? Here there is something which we have to ask ourselves. When they say that they would straighten and open during early morning hours, respectively, we have to ask ourselves, that word respective there, what is it standing for? Respective there. Because they are saying that they would do straighten and then open during early morning hours. Now the question is, what is straightening and what is opening? That's the question we should ask ourselves. What is straightening and then what is opening, respectively here? Now, when you read this statement here, where they say, during the season, the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop and the flower petals remained closed. It means that it is the leaves which are straightening and the flower petals are opening during early morning hours. Now, take note that these two things that we have mentioned here in the scenario, when they say leaves would straighten, the question is the straightening of the leaves caused by the conditions experienced? Yes, of course, they are caused by the conditions experienced. Then another question is, are they leading to poor yields? Because our original task says, which led to poor yields. So the straightening of the leaves does not lead to poor yields, and also the opening of the flower petals does also not lead to poor yields. So therefore, it means that when we read through our scenario, we have only been able to extract out only 2 points. So these are the ways how the conditions affected the plants. These are the 2 ways. But take note, the minimum responses in most cases are always 3. The minimum expected number of responses in most cases are always 3. When you generate 2 responses to a given task, don't celebrate yet. It is not yet over. But however, you can only celebrate if you realize that you have at least generated 3 or more responses. Now, according to those principles there, it means that on our task A, we are not yet done because we've only been able to generate only 2 responses, and we have picked these 2 responses from the scenario. Now the question is that all? In most cases, it is not all. These are not the only expected responses. So it means that there is somewhere, there is a point that we also need to extract out that perhaps we have not yet seen. And when you look at this, the phrasing of this scenario here, you realize that most of the answers are coming from this third statement here. During the season, the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop. Now the question is, what point have we left out? How else did these conditions affect the functioning of these plants? And if yes, what is it? That's now what we have to ask ourselves here. And the answer in this case here is hidden in the drooping. In school or in class, your teachers must have taught you factors that affect the rate of transpiration, or how plants overcome excessive water loss, or how plants overcome transpiration. So if they have taught you that, then it is clear that some plants, when the conditions are too hot, or when they realize that they're losing a lot of water through respiration, they respond by drooping. And what is the drooping? They have simplified for us here that the drooping means leaves bending downwards. But also, when these leaves bend downwards, this also triggers closure of the stomata. The stomata also close. It is not obvious. Drooping of the leaves, also the stomata always close as another mechanism of trying to minimize water loss. And that one is in the drooping, so you ought to be knowing that drooped leaves also have their stomata closed. Therefore, we shall now take that one as our point number 3. Therefore, I'm going to also note it down here as the closure of the stomata. Closure of the stomata. Now, again, when I look through this scenario, you cannot find any other response. You cannot find any other condition, sorry, any other way how the conditions affected the working of the plants. So it means that this task A has given us we have been able to extract out only 3 responses or 3 points. The first point is drooping of the leaves. The second point is closure of the flower petals. And the third point is closure of the stomata. But the task is clear, saying describe how. We have not yet described how. What we have just been able to list, we have just been able to list the points that we are going to describe. Therefore, it is important that whenever you're interpreting these scenarios here, start by extracting out your summarized points. Start by extracting out your summarized points from the scenario. Then after having your points, then there, it gives you a clear picture or a clear understanding of the number of points that are expected of you from to be able to answer on a particular task. So it means that now our task A has only 3 responses, and those are the 3 responses. Now, how are we going to describe? Now, describing now, you have now to use your biology, and you try to describe how would drooping of the leaves affect the functioning of the plants? How would the closure of the flower petals affect the functioning of the plants? How would the closure of the stomata affect the functioning of the plants? So you have to explain, to describe each and every point that you have listed. And I'll give you an example of a well-described point. Then I will also task you to develop your points. You now describe the other remaining 2 points. Now, I'm going to write like an almost nearly perfect point or perfect response for this task A. So, and I'm going to describe the point of drooping of leaves. Now, this is how I would respond if I'm a candidate. After knowing that I have to write about these 3 points, so I'll start with my first point. I will say the conditions experienced cause the drooping of the leaves the conditions experienced cause the drooping of the leaves, which reduces surface area for trapping of sunlight, energy, hence reducing on the rate of photosynthesis. Hence reducing on the rate of photosynthesis. That is my point. Fully described. So as a student, I would have written my point like this. Now, and to which task am I responding to? The task is saying, describe how the conditions experienced affected the functioning of the pumpkin plants, which led to the poor yields. And now me, I'm saying that the conditions experienced caused drooping of the leaves, which reduces surface area for trapping of sunlight energy, hence reducing on the rate of photosynthesis. That is now a complete description of how drooping affected functioning of the plant. Now, take note, when you, for example, this response that I have written is for this particular task and for this particular scenario. Now, don't use these answers, don't write and cram them, thinking that these answers are going to be to help you in any way. These answers stop here. You'll never find any other scenario that requires you to write this answer as I have typed it on the computer. It is not there. But however, when you're looking at that answer, pick some skills from it. Ask yourself, how have I picked out this response from the scenario, and how am I explaining it vis-a-vis the demands of the task? That's very important. Like I told you here, it is about the skills. It is about the skills. It is not about the content that I'm going to give you. And we shall later see that these skills can actually be applied on each and every scenario. So this is our first point. Now, I'm going to task some volunteer schools. I want you to now describe for me the point of closure of flower petals, and I again want you to describe for me the point of closure of stomata. If you were in an exam, how would you rate your responses? So I don't know if there are teams which have finished or if there are schools a group which has finished. So type your answer in the chat. I'm going to access it from there. Or if someone wants to read it openly, you can raise up the hand. You can use the icon for the hands up. Then I give you an opportunity to read loudly your response. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. Look at the scenario, look at the task, look at how I have developed my response, and then use that skill to be able to explain these ones here. Okay. Let me first pick someone from. Okay, let me unmute. I have unmuted. Lango College. Lango College. What have you come up with? Lango College, you can unmute.
Okay. The closing of the flower petals reduced pollination as the pistils and stamens were not being accessed by the agents of pollination, and therefore a few pumpkin fruits were formed.
Okay, thank you for that. Pacada seed. Pacada seed, you can unmute. Pacada seed.
Closure of this, the condition experienced caused the droppings of the leaves and reduce the trapping of
Come on, please. Remember, we're not talking about the drooping of the leaves. We are on the closure of the flower petals and also closure of the stomata. So that those are the points that I'm interested in.
closure of the stomata act as a barrier to the diffusion of the carbon dioxide into the leaves, hence no carbon dioxide fixation into the process of photosynthesis, hence poor yield.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let me also first go inbox very fast. Chinoni integrated their saying closure from carrying out pollination and fertilization and poor yields, low food production within the pumpkin plant caused by high temperatures, which droops the leaves. Then the conditions experienced cause the closure of the petals, which reduces exposure of the anthers and the stigmas, agents of pollination, hence reducing the chances of saying dry spell caused water shortage in the soil. Roots, this is limited active. Now, I have picked some point. Let me talk about this one here. I'm going to copy it inbox, then I share it on the screen. Okay. Now, this is the response I have picked from the refusing to come. But anyway, let me read it. It is not coming out. But now, this one is saying that the dry spell caused the water shortage in the soil that limited osmotic absorption by root hair. This limited active absorption of mineral salts. Now, that response, the candidate is saying that the dry conditions, reduced water reduced water in the soil, hence the roots could not absorb water. Now, the question is that response, what evidence is given here in the scenario that indeed shows that the roots did not absorb mineral salts? Now, that response that is not supported by anything in the scenario, and more so, that point is beyond our 3 points. Remember, we extracted these 3 points from the evidences given in the scenario. Of course, the plants behave differently, and conditions affect plants in different ways. But for this particular scenario here, they have given you how these conditions, in particular in this village here, affected the plants. And I've also given you ways how the plants were affected. So you do not carry any mean that you know how plants are affected and you give it and you think that that response is correct. All your responses should be pointed towards evidences given in the scenario. Then I like all the schools that have participated in reading the responses. Those responses were actually okay. For example, if it is closure of the flower petals, we say that the conditions cause the closure of the flower petals. Therefore, the pollinators could not access the stigma or the anthers, hence fertilization could not take place, or even pollination could not take place. So that is how we respond, or we respond to such scenarios in such circumstances. Please, I again caution you, don't cram these answers that I'm giving you, but rather look at the skills that you're going through to have them responded to. Okay, then I want now to go to task number B. But however, before I go to task B, I want to open up, if you have any question, as to how you think this task could have been answered, but you've seen me not take that approach, you can ask so that I can clarify. This is the approach that I have taken. Now, do you have any other response that you feel that these answers are supposed to be for example, because now for us, we have only been able to identify only 3 points. So if you think that there is a fourth answer, but that fourth answer is not catered for, then you can raise it, then we discuss, we see whether it is okay or not okay. So I'm going to open up. If you have a question, you can raise up your hand, then you ask, then we have it answered. I will start with the, let me start with the Bishop's Girls School, Bushere. Bishop's Girls, you can unmute and then ask your question. Bishop's Girls, are you there? Okay. Meanwhile, if Parombo, you're ready, you can unmute. Parombo SS maybe.
Well, you mute
Okay.
again.
You can come up. Okay, Bishop is okay. What's the question?
According to the scenario, is it necessary to explain how the system is affected?
I am saying, isn't it necessary to explain how
The process of the synthesis was affected?
Oh, how the process was affected? Okay, that's an interesting question. So she's asking that, according to the task, isn't it necessary to explain how the process was affected? And in this case, I guess you're talking about the process of photosynthesis. Now, for instance, how is photosynthesis affected in this case here? Photosynthesis is affected when the surface area reduces and the plant traps less sunlight. So in my point, it is explained. Because in my point, there are two things you can capture. There are three things you can capture from my point here. First of all, I have stated how the conditions affected the plant, that they caused the drooping of the leaves. Then, how was the drooping of the leaves a problem? That the drooping reduced the surface area for trapping of sunlight. And this one reduced the rate of photosynthesis. So maybe unless if you had a different explanation that you're expecting, you can give it to us. Then we see whether it is necessary or not necessary.
Tell them what to do.
Yeah, no. Listen.
Tell them how you feel.
Yes, Bishop. So you, what did you think we had? How did you think we had to answer it?
For my thought that under A, you had to show like when photosynthesis is affected, what is the result? And I saw it. Okay, go to the question that is asking where was the answer. Thank you.
Okay. If I have got you right, you're saying that after photosynthesis, then you describe what happened. Of course, I'm sure you want to tell us that which led to poor yields. But which led to poor yields is given in the task. That is what you're responding to. You're responding how these things led to poor yields. So you repeating that it led to poor yields in your response doesn't add anything to your response. It doesn't make it unique. After all, I know in the task, I'm expecting you to give points that led to poor yields. Now, whether you mention the word poor yields or not, it doesn't add anything to the response. Okay, let me now get from Lango College. Lango College, you can unmute.
Good evening once again, guys. I have only one concern. Now, from the scenario, it is saying that the flower petals remain closed for a longer part of the day, but they would straighten and open during early morning hours, respectively. Now, for this case, the flower petals encloses the stigma and the answers. You know all those things of pollination. Now, when they're enclosed by the petals, it means that the bees won't be able to access them for pollination. You get so the pollination will be reduced because the bees are also one of agents of pollination. So when the anther and the stigmas are enclosed in the petals, you get.
What is the question? What is the question?
It is not a question.
We are calling for questions.
It's okay.
Now he's trying to explain what happens, but we're in the session of questions. Okay, let me get another person. Okay. Light vocational, you can unmute. Light vocational.
We just want to know whether we specify the problem or not. Like the condition in the scenario, we have like the dry weather conditions. Do we specify that the dry weather condition caused this, or we just say that the conditions experienced?
Well, now, these conditions are not unique. They don't cause different effects in the plant. They don't. All of these conditions lead to these things that we have highlighted here. The high temperature leads to drooping. The much sunshine leads to drooping. The dry winter conditions lead to drooping. That's why we are saying that the conditions experienced, because all of them and at once cause all of these conditions. So it may not be necessary to specify. Maybe if you want to say that the high temperatures, much sunshine, dry winter conditions cause the drooping of the leaves. If you want to do it like that, it is also okay. But now I hear he said the conditions experienced cause the drooping, cause all those conditions hold all these things, and they affect them in the same way. Okay, let me have power CDSS, power seed. Power seed, you can unmute. Power seed, we can't hear. We can't hear. Raise your volume. Oh, get closer to the computer. Okay. We can't hear her. Now, let us first proceed to task B. Then we shall come back to that one later. Because what matters now is not the content, but however, the skills that we are going through to interpret the scenario. Okay. Okay. Now, let us look at the second task. The second task is saying, explain how the pumpkins managed to survive the conditions. Now, remember too that for any task, ask yourself, what does this task want? That's the question. Now, this task wants us to explain how did this pumpkin manage to survive? And where are we going to get the answers from? Go back in the scenario. Read from the first word. And when you find what you want, you note it down. And I told that the best way to pick your responses from the scenario, start reading from the first word. So we are going to repeat reading this scenario, but have in mind, what are we looking for? So we are going to read the scenario, but looking for, how did this pumpkin manage to survive? Are there any clues given to me in the scenario? And I'll read afresh. So they're saying, Martin is always, when you're interpreting these scenarios, please also take time, read, repeat everything from the first word. So Martin is a pumpkin farmer in Kasongola village. There is nothing in that statement because we need, how did these plants survive? So in this statement, there is nothing. Then they are saying the village experienced a long dry season characterized by high temperatures. Is there anything that we want? There is nothing. Much sunshine and dry windy conditions. There is also nothing there. During the season, the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop. So we first pause there. They're saying during the season, the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop. And what are we looking for? We're looking for how did these plants survive? I think in that statement, there are some points there. So during the season, the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop. So what are the points there? Drooping of the leaves causes these plants to, could have caused plants to survive. So I'll first write that point. Drooping of the leaves. Then also that point reads that that point, sorry. Okay. So we are here, they're saying during the season, the hairy pumpkin leaves would droop. And what are we looking for? How did these plants manage to survive? And the first point we are saying, drooping of the leaves. Then what is the next point? We should continue reading. When you look at that point, there is also that word, that statement of hairy. It is true also, hairs is a mechanism that is employed by plants to try to persevere in such conditions. So another point will be hairs on the leaves. Hairs on the leaves. That is our point number 2. We continue reading. And flower petals remained closed for a longer part of the day. There is also something there. Flower petals remained closed. Now the question is, when these flower petals close, can they, when they close, can they help the plant somehow to survive these conditions? I think they can. So we shall also note down that point. Closure of the petals for a longer part of the day. For a longer part of the day. That is my third point. I'll continue reading. But they would straighten and open respectively. So what is straightening and what is opening? At the start of this session, we explained that straightening, it is the leaves that straighten, then it is the petals that open during early morning hours. Now, does the straightening also enable this plant to survive these conditions, straightening in early morning hours? And in my view, it also does. Another point will now be straightening of the leaves early morning, straightening of the leaves early morning hours. That is another point. I continue reading. Straighten and open. What is opening? It is the flower petals that open. So I'll also write that point. Opening, because it is also, that mechanism can also help plants survive. So opening of the petals early morning hours. Early morning hours. Like that. Then I continue reading up to the last full stop. Then they are saying Martin had a very poor yield of pumpkin, and that is the end of the scenario. So this is now what I have extracted out from my scenario. And which question am I answering here, or which task am I answering here? This is the task we are answering. Explain how the pumpkins managed to survive the conditions experienced. And I went in the scenario, started reading word per word, extracting out, is there any information given to me as to how these plants could have managed to survive those dry conditions? And this is what I'm getting. So I have picked out how many points? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it means that task B has a maximum of 5 expected responses. They are not 4, they are not 6, but has 5 expected responses. That is task B. Task A, we saw we are only able to get 3 responses from the scenario. Now, task B is giving us 5 responses, and all these were picked them from the scenario. So now this is my outline of the points that I'm going to explain to respond to task part B. So, and that is the most important part. We're meant to get to know which points am I going to explain. That is the most important part and the hardest. And when you get that skill, then you'll always find scenario interpretation will always be very, very easy. Now, the task is saying explain how. So these points are not explained. These points are listed. So we need now to explain point per point. How does the drooping of the leaves help plants survive the conditions? How do the hairs on the leaves help these pumpkins survive the conditions? How does the closure of the petals help these plants to survive the conditions? You explain each and every point. And for purposes of time and also quick grasping of the skills, I'm going also to give you how I would do. Why, if I was a learner, how would I explain one of the points? Now, after knowing that now these are the points that I have to explain, so I'm going to pick randomly. Let me still also explain the drooping. So how would I explain my point? I'm in an exam. I would simply say because the task is explain how the pumpkins manage to survive the conditions. So I will say the leaves drooped, which reduced, the leaves, let me first expand this. So I will say the leaves drooped, which reduced the surface area. The leaves drooped, which reduced the surface area for transpiration. Or I can say for water loss, hence minimizing water loss from the leaves. Let me see how now it sounds like. So we're saying that the leaves drooped, which reduce surface area for transpiration or water loss, hence minimizing water loss from the leaf. Now, here I have explained how the drooping helped the plant to survive. If it is maybe straightening of the leaves, how would I explain such a point? I would basically say that so I want now to explain the point of straightening of the leaves during early morning hours. I can just say that the leaves would straighten early morning hours, and which enables the plant carry out photosynthesis with minimal water loss when the temperatures are cooler. How does that sound? Let me write it here. Now let me now read the one for the petals. I can say petals would open during, I will say petals would open during early morning hours I would say petals would open during early morning hours, enabling pollination with the minimal water loss when the temperatures are cooler. So like this, because I know if these flower petals open when it is hot, then they are also likely to cause or to increase water loss through the petals. And this plant doesn't want to lose the water. So this is how I would explain the point of opening of the petals during early morning hours. The close of the flower petals for longer part of the day, I would say that the flowers would close their petals during for a longer part of the day, hence minimizing water loss through transpiration during hotter temperatures or during hotter hours of the day. Hairs on the leaves, how do they help the plant to survive? I would say that the leaves have hairs which trap a layer of air around the leaf, hence reducing water loss by transpiration. And I would have answered task B. And where are all responses coming from? Responses are coming from the scenario. So the most important thing to take note is that when you are interpreting or extracting out responses, you get all the responses from the scenario. I'll give you an example here. We know that some plants survive dry conditions by shedding of leaves. So if a student said that, the pumpkins survive the conditions by shedding their leaves, we shall ask ourselves, we shall now go back to the scenario and we ask ourselves, wait a minute, in this scenario, where is it shown that these pumpkin leaves that these pumpkin plants actually shed off their leaves. And if there is no evidence that they shed off their leaves, then that response will be rejected because there is no evidence in the scenario. So that is how we interpret and respond to scenarios. Now, we realize that what have we been doing? We have just been interpreting the task and then answering the and responding to it. We have not yet asked ourselves which element of construct is it coming from. We have not mentioned that. We have not mentioned that now this item comes from this topic. Therefore, you have to answer it using knowledge from this topic. That is not relevant. That is not your role as a student. There is nothing you need on elements of constructs. Whether you know them or you don't know them, they're not going to help you in answering these items. For you, what you need to know as a student is just one. How do I interpret and understand the demands of the task? That is the only thing that you need. How do I interpret and understand the demands of the task? And when I'm responding, you have to stick to evidences given in the scenario. Okay, so we're now going to go to another item. But before we go to another item, I'm going to first take about 2 minutes perusing through the chat because I'm seeing it has over 99 plus messages, and some of them may be having something urgent that I have to address before we go to the next item. But however, in the next item, we are going to, now I'm picking numbers randomly. I'm going now to go, okay, I'm going now to go to item 4. So meanwhile, you'll be reading through this scenario item 4, scenario 4, then we shall see what does the task want us to do and how can we get responses from the scenario. So let me first peruse very fast through the chat inbox. Then I'll now be responding to things that are coming in the chat box. Okay. Okay, most of them were responding to some things in the chat box. Okay. Okay, I'm just perusing through to see if I can find there an urgent question which I have now to respond to. Okay, so one was not getting the audio. I hope things now reached a time and they became better. Okay. Well, Jenny Manuel was saying high temperature and too much sunshine caused water loss that limited carbon dioxide uptake, reducing the rate of photosynthesis. Hence, less food will be manufactured and stored in the pumpkin fruits. Now here you have mixed up things. You're saying high temperature and too much sunshine caused the water loss that limited carbon dioxide uptake. Is it true that water loss limits carbon dioxide uptake? So you're mixing things there. That the biology is not correct. Okay. People are asking what of translocation? Now, translocation, you're saying that why is it necessary to explain how the plant processes is related to the condition? Now, when you say that translocation. Now, there is no translocation here in this scenario here. There's no connection. There's no translocation. And all the things that you have to respond to, at least they have given you hints in the scenario. And as per those things, there is nothing that is about movement of materials, movement of manufactured food. It is not there. It's not there at all. So in that scenario, translocation was not necessary at all. Then Timothy is asking, is transpiration connected to the drooping of leaves? Transpiration, yes, it is. Yes, transpiration is connected. How? When leaves droop, they reduce the surface area. Remember, if the leaf is straight, it exposes a lot of surface area to water loss by evaporation. Because evaporation is also transpiration. So if the leaves droop, that means they're trying to reduce the surface area of the leaf exposed to water loss by transpiration. So there is the connection there. It is there. Okay. I'm happy someone is saying pollination, not pollution. So please don't write the word pollution. It is pollination. So you always have to be very careful how you rate things. Recently, the UNEB released the report of how the candidates of last year performed. And when you go to biology, there was a problem whereby you confuse some words. Someone, instead of rating the word pollination, you end up rating pollution. Instead of rating the word drooping, you end up rating dropping. So you have to always be very cautious how you rate the different biological terms. Okay, someone is saying you're too fast, sir. Please pardon on the point of hairs. Sometimes I try to be fast in that so that we can talk about many things in the least time possible. Because time is not our best. Time is not our best ally. Okay. Let me now read the most recent ones. Someone saying, can I connect drooping of leaves to closure of stomata? How can you connect drooping of leaves to closure of stomata? Now, the drooping of leaves, not that the drooping of leaves leads to closure of stomata, but when leaves droop, also the stomata closes to minimize on water loss. Okay. Sharon is asking a very good question that, can't I use any additional knowledge apart from the scenario? Now, you cannot use any additional knowledge apart from what is given in the scenario. There is a reason why they have given you that scenario. That scenario is the point of reference. It's like they have given you, it's like they have taken you to, say, Karamoja, and they want you to study the situation in Karamoja, and you help the people of Karamoja there. But for you, when you're helping them, you also tell them that you can also do this because it happens. The question is it applicable in that place of Karamoja? So please, when you respond to these scenarios here, don't get everything you know and you just list it as a response. Whichever response you list, it must be having backing in the scenario. So you don't just use anything anyhow. Okay. So I think I've covered most of the I've seen. Okay. Okay. Now let us go to item 2. Now item 2, this is now when we say we are using item 4. Now 4, we are also going to use the same skills that we used for item 1. The same skills. that we use for item 1, the same skills. So what is the task? The task is clear. I'm hoping that everyone has read through this scenario here. The task is clear. As task is saying, explain how the different activities have caused the challenges in the area and how they can be overcome. Now, this task is a 2-in-1. Now, when you find such tasks which are 2-in-1, the best thing to do is break it down into 2. Then you answer part per part. The first one is saying, explain how the different activities have caused the challenges. So what you do, you first respond to this one here. How the different activities have caused the challenges. Then when you finish, you now go to the second portion. How can they be overcome? And what is the approach here? Now, the approach here is this. Here, I will want you to write. I will not type. I will not type. So, what does this task want? The first portion is how the activities caused the challenge. At least that is the first thing that the task wants. It wants to see how the activities caused the challenges in the area. In the area. At least this is what this task wants. How the activities caused the challenges in the area. The question is, when they say how the activities, what are these activities? And what are the problems in the area? Then we go now and peruse through our scenario. Are these activities given? If they are given, then we should extract out those activities and then now start explaining how they cause the challenges in the area. And another question is, are these challenges given to us or they aren't given to us? That is also very important. Are they given to us or they are not given to us? So we shall start. So we are going to read the scenario, but what are we looking out for? The activities. In that, we can now explain how these activities caused the challenges. And when I look through this scenario, I'm able to see a number of activities. So you rate. I'm not going to rate, but you rate for purposes of tracking. Now, they're saying how the activities caused the challenges. I will start. A hilly place previously covered with a thick vegetation. So you start afresh. But however, when you read, you come, you find there's the first activity of timber cutting. So there's an activity of timber cutting, this one here. Let me, okay. Let me highlight it. So there is this one here. This is activity number 1, timber cutting. Then activity number 2, charcoal burning. Activity number 3, rearing of cattle. Activity number 4, crop gardening. Activity number 5, bush burning. Activity number 6, digging up and down of the slopes. Oh, these are the activities. So it means that now I have now to explain how do these activities cause the challenges in the area, and are the challenges given? I think they are given. So what are these challenges here? So for the challenges, I'm going to, so the challenges are strong winds. Then we also have mudslides, and we also have flooding of gardens in the valleys. So it means this task wants you to explain how any of these activities causes these problems seen in the area. So it means that now here you're going to do matching. What does timber cutting cause in the area? And what are the problems of the area? The problems of the area are only three: strong winds, mudslides, and flooding of gardens in the valleys. Now the question is, how would I rate my first point? My first point should be on timber cutting. My second one on charcoal burning. My third one on rearing of cattle. My fourth one on crop gardening. And my sixth one on bush burning. So it means that this first portion of the task requires me to rate a maximum of 6 responses. Why? Because the activities given to me are 6. So it means that now here I'll have to explain 6 points. A point on charcoal burning, a point on timber cutting, a point on rearing of cattle, a point on crop gardening, and a point on bush burning. But I should connect all these points to problems that they cause in the community or in the area. So that's the approach for this first portion of the task. So it means that here I'll have to explain 6 points for the first portion of my task. And what was my first portion of my task? It is this one here. This one. How the different conditions, so how the different activities have caused the changes in the area. So I'm going to give you an example of one explained point. Then you see how points are constructed. So I'll rate my first point. I've told you that my first point is on timber cutting, because that is the first activity identified. So I will say that timber cutting removes trees which act as the windbreaks, hence causing strong winds in the area. Hence causing strong winds in the area. Oh, I have explained my point number 1. The activity is there and the challenge is there. The challenge done in that community is also there. So the problem in the community was strong winds. And I've been able to say that it is the activity of timber cutting. But how does timber cutting lead to this? That timber cutting removes trees which acted as windy breaks. My point is done. Then now ask yourself, which activity, so the which challenge in the community or in the area does charcoal burning cause? You explain how it causes it. Rearing of cattle. Maybe let me also help you explain the point of rearing of cattle. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to minimize your participation because we are running out of time. So I may not be able to engage you. Maybe sometime again in the holidays and also early third term, we shall have a final session, a final facilitation on biology to give you more of the tips. But however, the skills are all the same. So I want to explain the point of rearing of cattle. So the activity is rearing of cattle. So now I'm going to ask myself, rearing of cattle, of these 3 problems that I have here, which one does rearing of cattle cause? And when I look through the biology, I will be able to connect rearing of cattle to flooding of gardens in the valleys. How? It is how I explain that point that qualifies to either be correct or wrong. So I will say rearing of cattle creates pathways which which increase surface water runoff to the valleys, hence causing flooding of gardens, hence causing flooding of gardens in the valleys. Like this. So rearing of cattle creates pathways which increase surface water runoff to the valleys, hence causing flooding of gardens in the valleys. I have also explained my point of cattle rearing. So I expect you to have 6 of these points and each activity once. Now, if you explain 2 or 3 points on timber cutting, that one can be considered that you're explaining the same thing many times. Therefore, it can be looked at as one point. I hope that one has, let me repeat it. A person can explain 5 points, but all of them on the activity of timber cutting. Now, all those 5 points, we shall say it is 1 point on timber cutting. Therefore, you need to explain at least each activity here once for you to be able to give us the 6 maximum points that we expect you to explain on this particular task here. So then, after now explaining all my points, explaining how the different activities have caused the challenges in the area, now I can now go to how they can be overcome. Now that is another thing. So if I'm rating, I'll now say, how can the problems be overcome? So I'm now on this one here. How can they be overcome? But the overcoming here, so I'm here. Explain how they can be overcome. This one here, explaining how they can be overcome. Now, for me, now, which points do I need to talk about here? So I want to explain how can the challenges be overcome. Before even I explain the challenges, I will first ask myself, what are these challenges that we are overcoming? That's the question. What are the challenges that we are overcoming? So that's the question. But however, now, for us to get the challenges, you have to go back to the scenario and ask yourself, are the challenges given directly? If they are given directly, then you look at them, then you now solve challenge per challenge. And in our scenario, we have the problem of strong winds. We have a problem of mud slides. We have a problem of flooding of gardens in the valleys. So I expect you to give solutions to these 3 problems. Therefore, it means I expect you to give me a maximum of 3 points in your responses. A maximum of 3 points. Tell us, how can the problem of strong winds be solved? You finish. Tell us, how can the problem of mudslides be solved? You are done. Tell us, how can the problem of flooding of gardens in the valleys be solved? You're done. That is how you answer. For instance, I can say how they can be overcome. Point number 1. I can say by planting trees or by carrying out reforestation to restore the trees that act as windbreaks to solve the problem of strong winds. That point is done. Then I can also say, for the mudslides, I can say that practicing maybe for the mudslides, I can say practicing maybe agroforestry, or also carrying out afforestation or planting trees, which trees can hold soil particles together, hence preventing mudslides from occurring. I take that one. Then I also, it is about mudslides can also be caused by digging or crop gardening. So I can also say that practicing good methods of farming like cover cropping to minimize the speed of running water, to prevent instances of to prevent instances of mudslides and also flooding of gardens in the valleys. So in other words, here I now handle problem per problem. So that is how you respond to this item number 4. And it is done. So let me check inbox for any questions. Then people were trying to respond. Someone is trying to explain from late vocational that digging up and down the slopes expose the soil to fast running water, hence flooding down the slopes. Now, is it true that digging up and down the slopes expose the soil to fast running water? Yes, it does. Because when you dig, you're removing the natural plant cover. But however here, the most appropriate would be that digging up and down the hill loosens the surface soil, hence increasing incidences of mudslides whenever it rains. And remember, there is a difference between mudslides and landslides. So when the surface soil is loose, it means when it rains, it can easily get soaked. And after getting soaked, now to form mud, all that mud can run downwards. That happens if the surface soil is very loose. So digging up and down of slopes can be linked to mudslides. Someone is saying that carrying out deforestation leads to global warming. I'm very happy that this one has come out. Very happy. Now, someone is saying that for him is now giving us how the challenges, how the activity causes the challenges. He's saying that deforestation, can I retrieve that? See? Okay, he's saying that carrying out deforestation leads to global warming. Now, this response is wrong. Why is it wrong? First of all, you're telling us carrying out deforestation. Now, when we go in our scenario, there is nothing like deforestation. It is not an activity here. Then secondly, you're telling us leads to global warming. Again, when we look through in our scenario, the problems they have given us, there is no problem of global warming. Therefore, when you are answering, please stick to evidences given in the scenario. Now, every aspect they have given in that point is wrong. You have talked about the activity of deforestation. In the scenario, there is no deforestation. Then you're telling us it causes the problem of global warming. The problems that they have given us in the scenario, there's no problem of global warming. So you stick to what is given in the scenario. Simon is saying, sir, don't we first identify the problem? Someone is saying, don't we first identify the problem? The question is, Which task are you responding to? Which task? If the task is saying identify the problem, why not? For you, your role is just, by the way, don't cram rules for all of these scenarios, whether biology or not biology. Don't cram rules. There are no rules. When you're going for these exams, go with an open, sober mind. Interpret. Use your own common sense. Interpret. What does this task want me to do? The tasks are always done in plain English, and there isn't any hidden information in how you interpret. Then when you interpret the task and you get to know what the task wants, respond to that task as the way it is given. Don't say that, no, the teacher told us that we do this. That's why I told you that the answers I'm giving you here, don't even bother writing down those answers, because you'll never get any task requiring that answer as it is. But what skill are you learning from my presentation? It's just about picking the skills. Picking the skills. Yes, you have the content, but can you use that content to explain different scenarios in life, or maybe the scenario that's given to you on a paper? So please take note of that. Okay, so I think we are done with item 4. We are remaining with only 14 minutes to close. Let me also read through the chart. What is meant by crop gardening? Okay. How about item 2 about coordination? Please, then again, now the person who has asked about item 2 about coordination, don't cram it that item 2 is always about coordination. For you, just your role is just simple. Which item are you going to answer, and what is the task? You just go by that. But we shall briefly also see how we can interpret that item 2 that you're referring to. Jerry is saying tree hold soil in place with their roots. When trees are cut, soil becomes loose and exposed. This leads to mudslides and soil erosion during rain. Aha, there is also another important thing here that Jerry has brought to my attention. I'm going to read for you Jerry's explanation of our point of timber cutting. He's saying trees hold the soil in place with their roots. When the trees are cut, soil becomes loose and exposed. This leads to mudslides and soil erosion during rain. First of all, when you say it leads to soil erosion during rain, I will go back to the scenario and I ask myself, is soil erosion a problem in this area? And indeed, when you go to our scenario, soil erosion is not a problem in that area. So it means for you're bringing all other problems that you know. But this scenario was very specific. It had specific problems in that area. And you have to stick to those specific problems in that given area. You don't borrow problems of other places. For example, if they tell you to solve the problems of Kasese, you don't again go and borrow problems for Marua and take them to Kasese and then solve them from there. You've not helped the people of Kasese. The people of Kasese have their own problems, and the people of Arua also have their own problems. So solve the problems of Arua, finish them. Then if it is Kasese, also solve problems of Kasese. You don't import the problems that you can solve them. Okay, I'm reading through. Aha. Also, Ivan is saying charcoal burning leads to accumulation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, hence high level of air pollution. I will again ask yourself, you're saying hence high level of water, high level of air pollution. When we go back to our scenario, where is that problem? Where have you read that in this area there was a problem of air pollution? So that response becomes wrong. Why? You are addressing a problem that is not in this given area. So please learn to stick to the evidences given in the scenario. Someone is saying Timber cutting acted as mulches, reduced soil erosion, are being cleared. That's soil erosion. So we have rejected those points. Any problem that you are solving must be the other three that are given in the scenario. Anything out of that does not work. Okay? I hope I'm very clear. Someone is saying that timber cutting, which reduces the number of trees, which leads to increased level of carbon dioxide gas in the atmosphere that destroys the ozone layer, hence global warming. This can be mitigated by planting fast-growing trees. Now, that response is wrong. That response is not correct. Let me actually even copy it, and I'm not sure whether people are now able to read everything written in my things written in my inbox. But let me, there is a point which, let me see if I can paste it here. Unfortunately, I cannot paste things here. If I see, sorry, don't mind about that. I want to see. I hope my screen is coming through. I have posted what they are written down. So, and I hope you're able to read that response. Now, let us see how wrong this response is, that we can now pick what ought to be doing. So this is his response. He's saying that timber cutting, which reduces the number of trees, which leads to increased levels of carbon dioxide gas in the atmosphere, that destroys the ozone layer, hence global warming. This can be mitigated by planting fast-growing plants. Now, this response here is wrong. This is answering another scenario. Why? The person is saying, yes, timber cutting is correct. It is an activity even in that scenario. But however, the person is saying that timber cutting leads to global warming. The question is, when we go to our scenario, where have you seen the problem of global warming? Global warming is not there. The scenario was very specific. It told you there was a strong wind, mudslides, and flooding of gardens in the valleys. I hope that one is very clear. So this response is wrong for this particular task. I hope I have answered that one. Then let me Tasha Morans is saying rearing of cattle also leads to dryness. Anyway, also the problem is the someone saying that rearing of cattle also leads to drying up of the vegetation in the area since the waste release gas by the cattle. So since the waste released by the cattle have methane, which leads to vegetation destruction. Still, I'll ask you a question. In the scenario, where have you seen the problem of vegetation destruction? So that response also becomes wrong. Okay. Okay. Someone is saying one of the solutions that sensitize into the local people about impacts of their activities. Now, if you give that point, I will still ask you, sensitize them about what? Which activity? Because the local people, they don't know the activities, they don't know that these activities are causing problems. So you tell them, how are you going to sensitize them? You're going to sensitize them on what? So you have to be very clear. Okay. Also something interesting. What if challenges are not given? That is perfect. So people are good. You know, they can always, sometimes they say that you can understand the intelligence of the person by the questions that they ask. Okay, so this person is very intelligent. But if challenges are not given, now, if challenges are not given, now that is a different scenario. If challenges are not given, that becomes a different scenario. So it means if challenges are not given, then you now have to look at an activity and think about which challenges can it cause. So that is how it can be done. So if they don't cram it often, that all scenarios will have to give you challenges. No, they will not. So if here, by the way, this scenario here, I can set it like this. I can now ignore. I can remove this part which is highlighted. I stop there. Then I ask you, explain how the different challenges have caused the problems or challenges in the area. Now, that one now is wild. All the responses that have been rejecting, in this case, actually will be very correct. When you look at timber cutting, you think which problems can come up as a result of timber cutting. So your responses of global warming, your responses of soil erosion, all those ones will be very correct because the challenges have not been given. Okay. Then someone is saying display the answers. The reason why I cannot give you answers to these scenarios is that you'll misuse them. You'll misuse them. By the way, if you find answers to scenarios, don't even look through them. Because those answers, if you cram them, they can never help you. Answers are scenario specific. The answers are scenario specific. So that's why pay attention. Listen, how am I interpreting the scenario? How am I interpreting it? And after interpreting it, how am I answering it? Then you pick those skills and you apply them on other scenarios. Because for you think it is good, it is okay, people to give you answers, they will not help you in any way. Because for you, when you get the answers, you just go and cram them. And when you cram them, you enter into a paper, you find another scenario. Then now what happens? How are you going to use the answers that you crammed? They will not help. So just pay attention and see how I am interpreting the task and how I'm getting answers from the scenario. Then another person is asking, please, basis of assessment. Now someone wants basis of assessment. Now I want you to be honest with me. In your mind, of course, I'm not going to ask people. You be honest in your mind. The answers that I have given you, am I able to give them to you because I know the basis of assessment? Or the answers that you have been giving, because most of you are giving correct answers inbox, by the way, that when I find the correct answers, I scroll and look for others which need explanation. Have you used your knowledge of basis of assessment to respond to these answers? No. For you, you don't need the basis of assessment. For what? Your role is just simple. What does this task want you to do? This one here. Then respond to the task. Whether you know the basis of assessment or you don't know it, whether you know the element of construct or you don't know it, it does not matter. It does not matter. So don't waste your time asking for elements of constructs. Don't waste your time asking for basis of assessment. They are not answers. They are not answers. For you, what you need are the answers to the scenarios. Okay. Of course, we are running out of time. This session was supposed to end at 6, but I'm going to borrow about 10 minutes to briefly help you interpret another one item, then we go to something different. Okay. Okay. Someone is saying, sir, are we allowed to tabulate our work? Are we allowed to tabulate our work? I don't know. And why do you want to tabulate? For you, your role is just simple. Respond to the task. If the task is saying tabulate your work, please tabulate it. If the task is saying don't tabulate, please, you just read and follow the demands of the task. With this new curriculum, or with the items you're going to do, if you get one thing that I just need to know what the task wants me to do, and then I follow that, you'll not have any challenges in answering these scenarios here. Okay. Okay. Okay, someone is worried of your name. What is wrong with your name? Don't worry. Okay. The responses, the messages are very, very many. Okay, now, quickly, let us now. The skills that I have given you, they are the same skills you're going to use to interpret item number 5. They are the same skills you're going to use to interpret item number 6. The same skills. If they say, explain why Chepkur's level of performance in sports had declined, then you go through and read through. What could have caused Chepkur's level of performance to reduce? And when you read through, you'll find that she had a poor appetite. So poor appetite becomes our point number 1. Then HIV positive becomes our point number 2. Heart diseases, point number 3. Respiratory disease, point number 4. Suffering from malaria, point number 5. So let's that now it means that in task A, you have to explain 5 points. You explain how does poor appetite lead to poor performance? How does being HIV positive lead to poor performance? How does having heart diseases lead to poor performance? The skills are the same for all items. Okay, people seem to be worried about Paulo. They are saying, okay, Paul, who was formerly a young, responsible man, joined a drinking group that he is so much attached to, drinks daily and heavily. His children are now out of school and look malnourished. One evening, as he was coming from drinking joint, he fell down and broke his only pair of eyeglasses that he has been using for long. Now Paul struggles to read from close range. The first task is saying how Paul's involvement in his group disorganized his family. Back to our basics. Ask yourself, what does this task want? What does it want? They want you to explain how Paul's involvement in his group disorganized his family. How did he disorganize his family? Now, you go and see for any clues. We start reading from the first one. They're saying, Paul, who was formerly a young, responsible man, joined a drinking group that he is so much attached to, drinks daily and heavily. So far now we ask ourselves, from that statement I have read so far, is there any information as to how his involvement in this group has disorganized his family? There is nothing there. Then we continue reading. His children are now out of school. This one here. His children are now out of school. I think this is correct for task A. Not so? So you rate, that is point number 1. Children are out of school. You put it there. And look malnourished. This is now point number 2. Because we are assuming that because of his involvement with his drinking group, therefore all these ones have happened. So this point, the statement that I have highlighted here, these are the 2 ways how Paul's involvement in his group disorganized his family. Therefore, task A has only 2 responses. So you have to explain how did Paul's involvement in his group lead to his children dropping out of school. So you can say that Paul must be spending the money meant for school fees in drinking. Therefore, his children are out of school due to lack of school fees. That point is finished. Then point number 2, his children look malnourished because Paul's can no longer afford to buy food for his children since he's spending much of the money or even much of the time with his drinking group. Task A answered. As simple as that. Then you move on. Task B. What is task B saying? Explain why Paul is now struggling to read and how his eyeglasses were helping him. So you go back. Why Paul is struggling to read? We go in the scenario and we'll find out. They are saying on one evening as he was coming from his drinking joint, he fell down and broke his only pair of glasses. Now Paul struggles to read from close range. Another ask, explain why is Paul now unable to read? So I will say, now I'll first ask myself, is Paul short-sightedness or long-sightedness? I'll ask myself that question. Is he short-sightedness or long-sightedness? If they say a person who has been using glasses for long, so it means that now he's dependent on eyeglasses. And they're saying, but now, without them, he struggles to read from close range. He struggles to read from close range. What does it mean? It means that if I'm struggling to read from close range, does it mean that I can read things at a far distance? Maybe yes, maybe no. But the interpretation of this one is that now Paul, it is that Paul, if you can struggle to read from close range, it simply means that he is long-sightedness. He is long-sightedness. But now other people can interpret that no, John is short-sightedness because struggling, if you put it in local language, means that if a person is struggling to read to read nearby, to see nearby things, then it simply means those ones at a distance, he cannot easily bother to read them. People who read with glasses. With glasses, they can read some things. Without them, they cannot completely read anything. So using that argument, you can also say that now maybe Paul is long-sightedness, or maybe Paul is short-sightedness because it means that with glasses, he can read nearby things. He can struggle to read nearby. So without glasses, he can struggle to read nearby things. Then with them, now everything becomes clearer. But now here, I'm sure why people were maybe interested in us going through this one. It is just how to interpret this one. Now, the interpretation of this clause here does not matter. If you call it short-sightedness, we shall now see how are you going to explain it and how are you going to solve that problem. If you call it long-sightedness, we are going to see how are you going to explain it and how are you going to solve it. Therefore, whether you say short-sightedness or you say long-sightedness, all of you will be correct. All of you will be correct. But however, the difference is, how are you going to explain it? One person can write short-sightedness and you get it wrong. Another person writes short-sightedness and gets it correct, depending on how you are able to explain it. Hope that one is clear. So don't focus on knowing that here the answer is short-sightedness. Then you cram that. This scenario will never come again. Even you will never find it anywhere in an original exam. It is gone. Therefore, don't cram this answer that now you have now known the correct answer to this scenario. But what matters is, how do you interpret and answer it? So how will I explain it? If it is the short-sightedness, I will basically say that Paul is struggling to read because he is short-sightedness. This is because the eyeball, of course, with short-sightedness, it means that the person can only see nearby things, but he cannot see distant objects. So I will say, because his eyeball is long or his eyeball is big, therefore things cannot be focused on the retina. And how can he be helped? So the helping also, you have to mention the type of lens he has to use and what that lens does to help him see. So it is about how you explain your responses. I don't want to go into the actual details because you're interested in cramming, but I'm sure teachers have given you most of those things. Then, what should be done in society to overcome the challenges related to those faced by Paul and his group? Now here, you look at Paul, because they're saying what can be done in the society. In other words, in the society where we have this kind of behaviors, what can be done? Now here you now have to scratch your head. That's when you now maybe compulsory, maybe you can say compulsory, no, putting maybe strict rules and regulations on alcohol consumption, maybe constructing sports facilities that the youth can use instead of spending time in drinking. Then you can also maybe talk about sensitizing the community members on how to sustain community members on the dangers of alcoholism. So here, everything you give, you are advising society. That's what this task wants. You are advising society. You are not advising Paul and his group, at least as per this task here. When you interpret it, when you look at the English that is in it, therefore, don't say Paul should take his children to school. The task is saying what should be done in society to overcome those challenges. So that's why knowing the demands of the tasks are very, very crucial for you to be able to interpret and respond to these scenarios. Okay. Okay. Okay, people are already asking for other subjects. Okay, so so I think I have now at least been able to guide you and also to give you some few skills on how you can interpret and respond to scenarios. And I have told you that the most important thing is that know the demands of the task. Then, after knowing the demands of the task, then whatever responses you give, please make sure that you use evidences given in the scenario. You don't just bring anything because it is correct and you think it will work or it is correct, is a correct response for that particular task. Okay. So unless if there is something burning, so if there is one, I will just accept 2 questions from the audience. So if you have a question, you can ask for permission and unmute you. Then you ask before we close. But otherwise, we shall organize another session, maybe in the holidays or early 3rd term, to also further give you more guidance on how you can interpret these scenarios and respond to them. Okay. ACT High School, you can unmute yourself and ask. Bishop's Girl. Okay, ACT, sorry. Let us first have ACT first. Yes.
What I got gospel.
ACT, your network is not clear, or not able to hear.
Okay, good evening, sir. My question is one. On the point of long sightedness versus short sightedness, if I give you the 2 points in the paper, am I correct or wrong? Thank you.
What? I beg your pardon? If you give what?
Okay. My question is one. Are you getting me now?
Yes.
Sir. Are you getting me now?
Yes, please.
Are you getting me? Okay, my question has been on long sightedness versus short sightedness and that scenario above, whereby you say they would both be correct. But if I give either of them instead of long sightedness, am I marked in the paper or? No.
Now, first of all, I don't want it to be a point of focus. I don't want the answer to be a point of focus. That if they ask me that scenario of short-sightedness, first of all, you'll not find that scenario anywhere in an original paper. That is gone case. You will not find it anywhere in an original paper. But the question is, have you understood how to interpret that particular task? Leave alone information given in the scenario. For you, if you look at if you look at this task here, are you able to interpret what this task wants for this particular task? If you're able to interpret what it wants, and you know if this information here was very clear, you'd now be able to know how to answer it. That is what is important. Just ask yourself, have you known what this task wants? If you know what it wants and how to approach it, then that's what should matter. Then secondly, in case you find this one here, if you give short or long, now what is Paul suffering from? Can Paul be suffering from short and at the same time is suffering from long? So it means you're also not be able to help Paul. You get it? So what is Paul? You pick one and you'll be having reasons. You'll be having reasons. So if you get all of them, if you write all of them, it means you're just guessing. You don't actually know how to interpret maybe this statement here and respond to it. So you're also just guessing. Maybe it is long, maybe it is short. But if you pick one, then we need to know why have you thought that it is that one and not the other. Then we shall now look at how you explain your point and we'll be able to judge you correct or wrong. Let me have Bishop's Girls.
The very good question. Item 5. You say that you should not mention deforestation. So I'm asking myself in the scenario there was charcoal burning. Can charcoal burning happen without deforestation? I think it involves cutting of trees.
Okay, thank you. Now, if you have known that in the scenario there is the charcoal burning, then you tell us charcoal burning. Why are you telling us deforestation? Yeah, so you don't mention things by proxy. You get it? If it is charcoal burning, tell us the people were burning charcoal and what that charcoal can cause in the environment vis-a-vis the challenges that have been given.
Yes, okay.
Okay, then Rafik Kamen Gonzalez SS, you can unmute and ask your question.
Evening, sir. My
Evening.
question is. Good evening, sir. My question is from. My question is from section B, part 1, item 4. It's all about if you are asked to explain only the challenges and you are not asked to explain the ways to overcome those challenges. Is it necessary for me to state how they can be overcome?
First of all, please, for you, respond to only the task that has been given. Okay?
Yeah, it's okay, sir.
Yes, you respond to only the task that has been given to you. You don't assume that, why have they not put this? Let me also put it there. Okay. Then Magale Secondary, Namisindwa.
Okay, sir, my question is that how do you answer according to the tense of the question?
Okay, how to answer according to the tense of the question. Now, that one is not an issue of biology. Whether you write in past tense, or you write in present, or you write in future tense, as long as when you read it through, you are answering the task. It doesn't matter. For us, what matters is, are you giving us the correct things as per the demands of the task? So the tense and the English does not matter. But you do something that even your consciousness tells you is right. Okay, let me have Nyarilo SS Koboko as we conclude.
So good evening, sir. Mine is just a request. Mine is just a request in that part of the scenario of Paul, where they're talking about him only seeing items in a close range. They are like, I just need your clarification. Like now you have explained about short-sightedness. After you explaining, then you give the correction, which means after that you now talk about the impact of him not having the glasses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now here, the task is saying, explain why Paul is now struggling to read and how his eyeglasses were helping him to read. Now here it means that, explain why he's now struggling to read. It means that now you identify the defect that he's suffering from and how that defect comes about. Now, how the effect comes about, you'll now be explaining why Paul is struggling to read. You have identified the defect, then how does that defect come about that is making him unable to read? Maybe the eyeball is big or the eyeball is small, therefore light rays cannot be focused on the retina. That's why Paul is now struggling to read. Then when you finish that, then they're saying how his eyeglasses were helping him. Then you now identify if he's suffering from short-sightedness, which glasses are good for short-sightedness? Then how do those lenses help a person who is short-sighted to read? Then maybe you can say that maybe since he is suffering from short-sightedness, his eyeglasses are maybe concave lenses, so concave lenses, which diverge. I think concave lenses they diverge. No, the concave lenses. Let me first illustrate it for you because people may use annotations. Okay, I think I've seen this. Okay. Okay, so we have something. Yes. Okay. So this one is a concave. This one is a concave. This one is a convex lens. Now, a convex lens, what it does, it converges light rays. Let me see here. Okay, it converges light rays. Like this. It converges light rays. Okay. So this one corrects the problem of long sightedness. I don't know if I can draw the convex one here now. Let me see. Okay. So what this one does, the reason why I'm doing this one, I just want to know how to explain them if asked to. Okay, like this. So this one is for nearby objects. This one is for nearby objects. So now, if you're explaining how, so we're explaining how his eyeglasses were helping him to read. So how were they helping him to read? What do you say? So, for example, when you look at this lens here, you can tell that this lens were diverged. So this lens converged light rays onto the retina, or these lenses converge light rays onto the retina, therefore able to read. Then this one, you say, if it is this lens, you say this lens diverges light rays from a nearby object and focuses it onto the retina, hence making him able to read. That's how you now answer the how part of it. Now, I've seen a question in the inbox. Are you free to use diagrams? In this case here, you may find that your explanation may come out if you use diagrams. So if you want to use diagrams or illustrations, yes, it is okay. You can use them. You'll still get all your points that are there. So it is okay to use diagrams to try to illustrate your point. But where you feel that diagrams are not necessary, it is not a must that you must use the the diagrams. So that is now the interpretation of this scenario here. The interpretation. Okay. Let me now, I hope I have answered that person there. Power seed, unmute and ask your question.
I would like to understand from you what explained about long-sightedness and short-sightedness. And that one goes to the scenario of how can struggle seeing nearby objects. That means he's not long-sighted. But I was hearing you saying you can either take short-sightedness or long-sightedness. I would like to understand more about that. And also, like if you're given scenario, and this on the topic, the subject is biology, and your response are not having biology in them, can they be marked correct or not?
Okay, thank you. First of all, if you have interpreted the task correctly, and when you're answering it, you are sure that you are responding to that task, then you don't have to worry whether it is biology or not biology, as long as what you're rating can actually respond or answer the task. For instance, here, if I say how Paul's involvement in his group disorganized his family, and one of the points we're saying that his children dropped out of school. Now, dropping out of school may sound to you that it is not biology, but it is correct. It is a correct response for this task here. So there is nothing like this is biology, this is not biology. It is just about responding to what the task wants you to give. So then you're saying you're confused about a person struggling to read from close range. I know this phrase here is subject to different interpretations depending on how you perceive the English in it. Irrespective of how you interpret it, that won't be an issue. Thus, we want to see how do you explain your own interpretation. For this particular scenario, don't again say maybe you can be there and you find a scenario and you pick that it is about sightedness. Then you say, yeah, if it is about sightedness, any interpretation is correct. According to this one, the interpretation does not matter. What matters is how you interpret, so how you explain your own interpretation. And in this particular scenario, it is intended in that a person who says long-sightedness and explains it well gets his score. Another person who explains short-sightedness and explains it well also gets their scores. For this particular scenario, it is not always like that, but for this particular scenario. Okay. So then now, lastly, I'm going to pick the person who at least using a name. Boran Benon, you're the last. Boran Benon, you can unmute and ask. Someone using Boran Benon account. Okay, he's not using his chance. Someone using the HP account. HP account. You can unmute. Thank you.
We had a question.
Mm.
That is you.
What if I join solutions? For example, on item 4, what if I join solutions to a challenge in one paragraph?
It is still okay. It is still okay if you add a solution in the same point with the challenge. It is okay. But however, for you to be organized, if you discover that the task has 2 in 1, so you can break it down. Get the first portion, answer it, finish it, then go to the next. It makes your work more organized. But in either way, it is okay. But when you separate them, it makes it more organized. Okay. Galaxy tab.
Thank you, sir.
Galaxy tab A7, you can unmute and ask your question.
Those students are also stubborn.
The one where you see a lady in a blue t-shirt, please unmute and ask. You first unmute, we can't hear you. First unmute.
Like, if an answer is transpiration affects the pumpkin through, the more water lost, hence makes the leaf droop.
So you're saying that the water lost by transpiration makes the leaves droop. Okay. So of course, drooping occurs when a plant loses more water than it can absorb. Now, drooping is a mechanism to try to minimize. So drooping is as a result of the leaves losing a lot of water that they can absorb.
Thank you.
Okay. Lastly, Magari. Then we close.
Okay, sir, I have a question. I want you to help me that which other way can I, okay, how can you help this Paul to correct long-sightedness without these glasses?
Because when you look in the scenario, when you see in the scenario, they're telling you that you're saying, how can Paul be helped to solve the problem without on glasses?
Yes, okay, in case they have asked which other way can you help him to correct that long-sightedness without using glasses. You know, this is new curriculum, so I have to be ready for any question.
And that one is off the syllabus, so don't be worried, they will not ask it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
It is under defects, eye defects. And eye defects, you're supposed to know their name and also how they can be corrected. And they can only be corrected using glasses.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome. So I think, of course, we can go on and on. But time is never our bestie alive. So I request that maybe Mr. Kaziba, if there is any closing remark from even Mr. Dungu, I'm handing over to you. Otherwise, I think we have come to the end of this session here. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Teacher Arthur, for the wonderful session, and thank you so much, everyone. Let me invite Mr. Ronald. Mr. Ronald, are you on?
Yes, Mr. Kaziba.
Yes, you can say something and then we have the session closed.
Yes, I would like to thank our facilitator, Mr. Kugonza Arthur. Mr. Kugonza Arthur is a senior educationist, and we are happy to have you support us in biology. Students and teachers, I hope it has been an enlightening session. You can see why it is important for us to come together and discuss. And I want to encourage you to continue the discussion at the school level, but also to encourage the schools to always, as teachers, always sit down and agree to host such sessions so that we can have many more of these. When we can, we will have our teacher back sometime, but as you know, these 2 weeks are also fully booked with the other subjects. So I want to wish you all a good evening and let us meet again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Teacher Arthur. You can end the session.